In this segment, we're going to talk about the 5 reasons you need to lead with services. Think about your next conversation with a customer. Do you want to go in and talk about product? Do you want to talk about quality? Or do you want to talk about outcomes? Service is your best outcome product ever. So let's lead with that. Get your pencil ready, pay close attention. You're going to like this. I need to give you 5 reasons to lead with services. I said at the beginning of the presentation, I thought it was very important that we lead with services. Let me tell you a little bit about my journey on this. One of my engagements, probably about 8 years ago, I got to work with one of the very largest integrators in the country, number 2, starts with a W, and we redesigned their sales and delivery process. Great company, and one of the constraints, well actually we found 3 major constraints, which we find in most integration companies. They have a constraint at design, they have a constraint at programming, they surprisingly didn't have a constraint at project management, which is really unusual, and they had a constraint at CAD. Okay? How do we address these constraints? And what we found out in that discussion and that discovery is that the salespeople were stealing designers to go to meetings to talk about concepts. So we're putting the most complicated, anal retentive, product-driven person in the company, damn right, we're putting them in front of the client and bogging down, and we're turning this into the most complex transaction ever imagined. And we're baffling them with technology and words and acronyms until they're in submission and they finally say, go away, just do a quote. Get us a proposal. And then we build the most expensive proposal possible using the most expensive people in our company. Am I on track here? Yeah, I am. Okay. Leading with services, the idea of leading with services, the most valuable service that they had, the one that was keeping us from finishing jobs, was actually programming. And we had the wild idea of, why don't we lead with programming? Why are we taking an engineer to a client meeting? Let's take a programmer. Let's talk about the client experience. Let's talk about the GUI. We want the client to describe the experience they get when they walk into the room. Describe to me your ideal meeting room. What does it work? How does it work? Tell me what the magic looks like. And oddly enough, very often the magic was doable. It's not the magic that we necessarily wanted to sell them, but it's the magic they were more than willing to pay a good value for. So when I talk about leading with services, I go back to that story. We take the service that the customer cares about, it's the GUI they're going to be living with after you're gone, and we're leading with that. If we can deliver the outcome that's described in that first meeting, we're going to have a better success rate. And oh, by the way, all of my scope creep just went away. Because the 2 people who determined what scope creep is just had a conversation, the buyer and the programmer. Think about it. So, dealer think interferes with service. That's our fundamental problem here. The way we think as dealers, it's that value add. We take a product, we add margin to it, a little value add, and we sell it. That's dealer thinking. And it gets in the way of services because we don't have a package for service. We don't have a distributor for services. Okay? We don't know how to, we can't define the box that services lives in, and we don't know how to price it. So we're frustrated. How many times have you had the discussion about selling service agreements and it devolved into, how do we estimate it? What's it based on? Do we go back and redo the entire job over again and then add a percentage to it? What's the percentage? We're trying to productize something that's not a productizable thing. The outcome is, my system works. And if it doesn't work, you fix it. I'm paying for uptime. What's uptime worth? Well, what's the price of downtime? What's the cost of downtime? What's the cost when somebody invests $100,000 on a fancy boardroom that's only up 60% of the time, and so it doesn't get used? The guy who spent $100,000 looks like an idiot. Is he going to get any of his initiatives done? Is he going to have any credibility in meetings? No. We hosed him. What's a system that has 100% uptime? The system that does what the client wants it to do. Software as a service has replaced licensing. We used to buy a software license. Are you selling software? Your clients are buying software all the time. A lot of what you do is software. You're producing software. Okay? You're programming DSPs. You're doing control systems. This is software. Are you selling it as a service? Is it a value add, or did you just slap a price on it? Why aren't you licensing it? Why aren't we thinking differently about this? Installation as a service is taking hold. Every time this discussion comes up, and it's come up many times in my career, it came up most notably 2007. I was at an Infocom 100 event, talked to the lead buyer at Shell, and he was going, why won't anybody sell me installation as a service? And when you talk to the dealers, they go, I don't want to finance that. Well, that's what banks are for. You're talking about something with a guaranteed return, with minimal risk. Why wouldn't you do that? It's because we think like dealers. Dealers don't hold anything. We don't want to hold inventory. We don't want anybody owing us money. I don't want to owe anybody money. That's dealer think. That's not commerce. We're not thinking like people in the commercial world. Transactional thinking keeps dealers from capturing the value of the outcome, and instead it focuses on the cost of the installation. Well, it's going to cost me too much to install that, and it's going to cost me $50,000 to install that, and they're only going to give me $3,000 a month, or $2,000 a month, or $1,500 a month. Yeah, for 10 years. Why are used car dealers really rich? Because they know how to finance deals. So, sell services. Number one, it's a brand conversation. It's not transactional. You have to talk about outcomes. 2, it's more valuable. It's a more valuable problem to solve. Okay? Sell services. It's a more valuable problem to solve, and you can improve the customer's ROI immediately by selling services. We can immediately take risk off of their plates and put it onto our plates. That's more valuable to them than a transaction. You need to learn how to sell against integration. If RFPs are the enemy, then why isn't integration the enemy? I mean, are you making great bucks at integration? Or would you like to make the 50, 60, 70% margins that you keep hearing about in service? Okay? Sell against integration. Why are you going in to sell a new install or a refurb instead of getting them to pay 1/10 of the money to make what they have last 2 years longer? I can get you 2 more years of life out of this, and here's what it's going to cost you. We're going to bring it back up to spec. We're going to replace these things and help the customer postpone the decision that they don't want to make. And oh, by the way, who are they going to do business with if you just save them $100,000 in a year that they didn't have $100,000 to spend? Solve their problem. Quit focusing on the integration. Services is ubiquitous. Okay? More of your customers or potential customers need services than installations. I worked with another extremely large integrator who has a managed services department. Hey, I could say they start with an A. That'll narrow it down. What they understood in that they were selling managed services and service agreements, and while most integrators, particularly small ones, want to go back and sell it to their existing customers and do an add-on, how's that working? We're not getting the add-on service agreements. Or you have to sell the service agreement first. They bypassed all their own customers. They took all the leads of their existing customers out of the hands of the service salespeople, and I said, you need to call on people who we did not do the installation. That's where service is valuable. Call on people who somebody else did the installation. Call on all of the installations that your competitor did and sell them a service agreement that extends the life of that, brings it back up to the original specs, fix all the problems of the poor integration, and gets rid of all the bad blood and be the hero. Why not be the hero? If you want to sell service, fix somebody else's installation. And that's what this rather large integrator started doing. That's who they're calling on. That's where they're getting their growth in managed services, because not only are they getting service agreements, they're getting the managed services agreements. Okay? If we want to do the integration and then talk about service or managed services, our ability to sell managed services is now dependent on how well we did the integration. And really, how well do any of us do integration? How many customers are really happy with the process? Not that many. Why not lead to something where you can be successful and say, let me take over the staffing of all your campus. Let me take over the staffing and the service for all of your campus. Let me bring everything back up to spec for you. And don't even worry about selling the next integration, because now you're solving a valuable problem for them. And when it is time to refurb, when you say, folks, we can no longer keep this room working to spec. We have to reduce the spec of this room, reduce the capabilities of this room. This might be time to think about redoing it. Who are they going to go to? Are they going to go outside of their managed services company that's embedded in their organization? Why wouldn't you lead with services? All of us, we're consumers. We deal with services all the time, okay? If you lead with services, you always have something to talk about with a lead, because they may not have an installation. Well, we don't need, we're not going to update anything. Okay, well, I'll call on you in 2 years. No, this is something they need now, and there's a problem that you can solve right now. So it's a great thing to lead with. Okay? Reason number 3 to sell with services. There's almost never an RFP. When was the last time you saw an RFP for services that wasn't a tag on to an RFP for an integration? Okay. Who's your competition? Your competition is somebody who wasn't clever enough to go out and try and sell services. Why wouldn't you lead with services? You get to create or uncover the need. You get to have a conversation with the client about how things work, what their challenges are, what would make their life easier, what would make them happier. Why not do all of that? Okay? Your competition is stuck in transactional conversations. They're not doing this. And it's your highest margin transaction. Why? It's your highest margin transaction. Why aren't you putting more energy into it? So apply the theory, the understanding of push versus pull selling, use the right technique, and increase your capabilities. Find the people who can sell services and get them out there selling services. The buyer supply is absolutely unlimited. It scales in your favor. The more service contracts you sell, the more money you make. It's simple. You got more people paying you for the same team of guys. Okay? They can't all have an emergency at the same time, though God knows they try. So it's very, very, very scalable.